Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 137.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
This is Keith Parsons, and today I've got Gery Pollet with me. Gery's with a company called Linxs out of Belgium. Gery, how are you doing today?
Very good, thank you, Keith.
So you're in Bruges. I've actually been to Bruges, kind of an old medieval city, right?
Yeah, a lot of people know the city because of the movie in Bruges, where at a certain moment, one of the actors said it's one of the most boring places in the world, and actually it's not.
That's probably true about most things they say in movies. And you've been around for a long time, so tell us a little bit about your history in the wireless world.
I have been active in telecommunications and internet since the mid-90s. I started, just as an example, one of the first ISPs in Europe, and the first one in Belgium. And I have been a Wi-Fi user since the late 90s, when we were using one of the first Wi-Fi adapters from a company called Compaq.
Just a small little company.
Yeah. Actually being bought by HP, and they are still around.
They are. And so in addition to, being an end user and starting an ISP, tell us a little bit about your involvement with the whole Wi-Fi itself.
Yeah, in around 2012, we started one of the first large city Wi-Fi offerings in Europe for the city of Bruges. We learned a lot, and then at a certain moment, we won a big tender for providing public Wi-Fi on a public transport company. So, and then we learned a lot about the combination of 4G, Wi-Fi, etc. And that's where the story starts of Linxs, what we are going to discuss today, I suppose.
Well, good. So I've also done some both city Wi-Fi and on transport. So we do have a little bit of a shared background there.
Yeah.
So tell me about your company. Company's called Linxs with TINXS. What does Linxs do?
Well, actually, the company is called New Things, and my wife came up with the name because she said to me, "You're always doing new things," and that's when the light on in my head, and I say, "You know what? I'm going to call the company New Things." So we started this company 2 years ago without a clear goal about what we wanted to do. We thought, okay, we're going to do something around Internet of Things, IoT. And that's referring, of course, to the name New Things. We did some IoT projects for operators and also big insurance companies, banks. Learned a lot about LoRa and Sigfox, which are quite popular, let's say, IoT small band technologies. So that's what we did in the beginning with New Things, and then about a year ago, we decided to start the development of our own device called Linxs because we saw a clear opportunity in the market.
Well, you have some other products mentioned on your website. I don't know how to say them. Wi-Fi Inks. How do you say that one?
Linxs is in fact our guest Wi-Fi offering. That's something we built. It's a cloud offering we built together with the Swedish company Aptilo. And it's a cloud offering providing or promoting guest Wi-Fi, managed Wi-Fi services to, for instance, retail, banks, smaller operators, etc. So that's indeed one activity. Then we have another product which is called Wally, from referring to where is Wally. It's a kind of a tracker running on top of LoRa, which is a kind of small band communication protocol. And based upon Wally, we also developed a narrowband IoT version of it, which is now becoming quite popular in Europe. And then finally, of course, Linxs, and I would say 90% of the focus of the company currently is on the Linxs product.
Well, while I have you here, can you give a quick couple minute description of what is LoRa, how is it different than Wi-Fi, and how is it being used today for IoT?
Yeah, that's a good question. What we always say to customers, if you have to send now and then information to a cloud, you don't need a continuous, let's say, VPN connection. So, and then you have to look at other technologies, small bands. For instance, if you want to hook up a temperature meter to the cloud, you don't need continuous connection. So you want to send now and then, let's say every 30 minutes or once a day, you would like to send the temperature. And therefore you need other technologies than Wi-Fi or LTE. So it started all the way back a couple of years with a French company called Sigfox. They were the first to promote what is now being named long-range, low-power radio. So the advantage of these kind of technologies is that, for instance, running on a battery, they can last for 5 to 10 years. They have very long range. So from the, let's say, the emitter to the radio, they can easily cover 10 to 15 kilometers. The disadvantage, of course, is that you have very small data you can send. Enough to send, for instance, the temperature, but not enough to upload to a coffee machine, digital signage, a video clip, for instance. Yeah. So in that case, you need LTE or Wi-Fi or fixed broadband. So it started with small band. It started with Sigfox. Then it was followed by another protocol called LoRa, and then the GSM Association jumped in, and they are now promoting, in fact, 3 different technologies. It started with narrowband IoT. The other one is Cat-M, and then the other one is LTE Cat1, which is a small band version of the standard LTE standard. So it's becoming quite a crowded place, complicated, and depending on the use cases of the customers, you have to be clever to see what kind of offering or what technology are going to offer to the customers.
And what kind of frequencies are they using, and at what power, transmit power?
The small bands are mostly around 800 to 900 megahertz. And then, of course, the broadband LTE, it starts at 900 and it goes up now till 3.5 gigahertz.
So is LoRa mostly in unlicensed bands, or are they?
The big advantage, yeah, that's a good question. So both LoRa and Sigfox are in the unlicensed bands. So the advantage is, of course, that everybody can start building its own network. The disadvantage is, of course,
everyone can build the same network.
Yeah, so you cannot offer quality of services. SLAs to your business customers, where narrowband IoT, Cat-M, and LTE Cat1 are really using the lower frequencies of the mobile operators. So the disadvantage is not everybody can do it, because you have to have an operator license. That's a disadvantage. The advantage is, of course, that no interference. You can build quality of services. You can offer SLAs and things like that.
Well, great. Well, I appreciate your sharing with us a little bit about those other technologies. Now onto the Wi-Fi LTE Linxs. What was the impetus behind building this?
Well, as I mentioned just before, elaborating about these different communication technologies, we were active in public transport, where we did a lot of installations doing combinations of 4G, LTE, and Wi-Fi. And then about, let's say 2 years ago, we saw more and more questions coming from customers who said, you know what, we're looking for a device that can communicate to the internet via either a fixed internet line or a mobile internet line, or even an open Wi-Fi network. And we want to do something, we want a device that's very flexible and that's cheap. The other question, they said, okay, we would like to add sensors to it. And then we also would like to add some edge computing functionality to it. So we started to look around, and we discovered that the market was divided in 2 big parts. On one hand, you had what we call consumer stuff. It started with single board computers like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, but also the standard 4G Wi-Fi MiFi routers. So consumer stuff, small, inexpensive, less than 100 euros. And on the other hand, you had then the professional stuff, mobile routers, for instance, edge computing, computers from companies like Huawei, Cisco, starting at a price of, let's say at least 500 euros or dollars, but easily running into 1,000 or even a couple of thousands of dollars. And what we discovered is that there was nothing in the middle. So a device that was small, inexpensive, with all the capabilities of, let's say, the bigger devices. And at that moment, we decided to develop our own hardware. That's how Linxs started, in fact.
Well, that's a big thing to bite off. To be able to fit just about anything that people want means you had to build a lot of flexibility into the product.
Yeah, correct. So Linxs we say it's 3 devices in one. I'm going to use some buzzwords right now. So the first one, we say it's an SD-WAN device, it's an IoT device, and it's an edge device. So regarding SD-WAN, it's another name to say, okay, it's a mobile router that supports different communication technologies, and it can create over the public internet a secure VPN tunnel to a central platform that allows you to manage all the devices out there in the field, no matter how they are connected to the internet. So that's the definition in a nutshell of SD-WAN. So Linxs has built-in Wi-Fi, 2 Wi-Fi radios, in fact. It has built-in LTE. It has built-in dual Ethernet ports. Next, it's also an IoT hub, so you can easily add IoT sensors to the device using, for instance, Wi-Fi or USB or Bluetooth. On top of that, because once we had the architecture ready, we decided to put in over 15 sensors in the Linxs device. So it comes with built-in GPS, gyroscope, accelerometer, air quality, light, noise detection, name it.
And those are all built in the base unit.
They're all built in the base unit. And then finally, we say it's an edge device because we have chosen a Qualcomm architecture, and we are running our own version of Linux on it. It's a dual-core ARM processor, so it has quite power. And people can install their own applications on top of it. So. And that's a combination. And just to give you one example of how people or companies are using that, for instance, we have a big manufacturer of coffee machines, and they wanted to connect their coffee machines out there in the fields using any type of network. So sometimes it's fixed Ethernet, sometimes it's 4G, sometimes it's via an open Wi-Fi network. Yeah, so that's the SD-WAN part. On the other hand, they wanted to measure certain things inside and around the coffee machine. Think humidity, vibration, temperature, but also using Wi-Fi scanning and Bluetooth scanning the number of people around the machine. And then finally, they wanted to do some edge computing on the device. By this I mean, if the temperature is always a constant, you don't have to send this kind of information to the cloud. So let the edge device, or the Linxs in that case, be intelligent enough just to send that piece of information to the cloud. That's important. So, for instance, when the temperature is changing, only then it will transfer the information to the cloud. And that's just one example. You can use it in public transport. You can use it in industrial machines. You can use it in retail, etc.
So it has these 3 big broad categories, but basically what I see is it is a communications device. It just allows something on one end to be communicated to something on the other, no matter what the backhaul is. I mean, you have Ethernet ports. You said you had dual Ethernet ports. Is it also that have the ability to route?
Yeah, it's in fact it's a mobile router, and in fact we have the capabilities to add up till 5 Ethernet ports. What you now see from companies like, for instance, VeloCloud, which was recently acquired by a company called VMware, they have these small routers with different Ethernet ports, and they will create over the public internet an IP MPLS network to a central platform. So it allows companies to save a lot on communication costs, because from now on they don't have to use a private MPLS network, so they can use just standard internet lines. And in order to build these kind of services, you need several Ethernet ports. Yeah. So in a nutshell, yes, it's a router and it supports SD-WAN functionality, which is becoming more and more important in the communication space.
So you could also use it as a remote office. Just give it to your employee and they can have a VPN connection back to your home office, no matter where they are, no matter what their backhaul is.
Exactly. So we have some banks testing it for teleworking purposes, where they use the device to let people connect at home to the corporate headquarters or on the road. So when people are driving around in the car, for instance, they can also connect in a very secure way over the public internet to the corporate headquarters.
So I see one of your competitors as a company called Cradlepoint. How do you compare with some of the Cradlepoint offerings?
I like Cradlepoint, and if I'm very honest, we were looking, of course, at the competition once we started to do that. And I think Cradlepoint, I put them in the category of professional grade routers. So they typically start at prices of 500 euros and easily go up till 1,000, 2,000 euros, where our offering typically starts around 250 euros for the hardware. Yeah? So I think that's the big difference. And then, of course, by putting in some sensors and promote it also as an edge computing device, the proposition towards the business customers is a little bit different.
And so the sensors are there in every device that goes out?
Yes. Short answer, yes. But since the architecture of the hardware is quite flexible, when companies, for instance, wants, let's say, 1,000 devices, we can easily change the number of sensors they want on a device. So we have, for instance, a smart city project going on where they are now thinking about adding fine dust sensors on the device and then leaving away some of the sensors which they don't want to use. So that's all possible.
I could see these also going into things like trucking and transportation, so you know where every device is as well as what its environment looks like.
Yeah, so you were mentioning a company called Cradlepoint. Another company that we took as an example of the type of device we wanted to build is Samsara. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but this company is founded by the ex-Meraki guys, the ex-Wi-Fi guys. And they build a very small device, which they are now focusing on, let's say, industry and transport. It also has built-in Wi-Fi as a hotspot, for instance, for cars. And at the same time, because of the built-in gyroscope, accelerometer, and GPS, they can monitor where a vehicle is, what the driving behavior is, etc. And that's also a type of market we address with Linxs.
And Linxs is powered via its little USB port?
Correct. So the standard version, it's powered via USB-C. So it's very low power consumption. It's 5 volt and a couple of watts consuming. We also have a version coming out very soon, which is IP67 with PoE, power over Ethernet for the power.
Oh, I'm sure there's a market for that one as well. You talked about LTE, Wi-Fi, AC, LoRa, all the different technologies. We work a lot with people who are more focused on a single technology, just Wi-Fi alone. What's the crossover between LTE and Wi-Fi in your knowledge base inside your engineering team?
That's a good question because
those are usually fairly separate because they act totally different. The protocols are almost opposite each other.
Yeah, yes and no. And I will give you one example. So we know Wi-Fi, of course, as being used as an access point. Yeah. So you can connect via Wi-Fi to a central router and then you go on the internet. We have several use cases where companies want to use for instance, an open Wi-Fi network as an uplink in order to save on costs of mobile broadband, LTE and 4G. And at the same time, they want to have a device that's capable of as acting as an access point. And I will just give you one example. We have a POC going on with a security company. They do a lot of installing cameras at retailers, yeah. And they were looking for a device that could connect to the open Wi-Fi network or the closed Wi-Fi network of the retailer. So to piggyback, in fact, the camera signal over the Wi-Fi signal. At the same time, they wanted to connect other cameras via Wi-Fi to an access point. And thirdly, they said, okay, in case that the Wi-Fi network drops, if, for instance, the connection is broken, we would like to have a device that can connect automatically then via 4G to our cloud platform. And that's something that Linxs is capable of doing. So you put it, for instance, in a retail shop. You can hook up the security cameras via the Wi-Fi access point to the Linxs, and then the Linxs will create over the open Wi-Fi network of the retailer a VPN tunnel to the cloud of the security company. In case the Wi-Fi network goes down, then the Linxs will automatically switch to LTE. So these are the kind of use cases why we decided to put all these technologies together.
Well, I can see how adding PoE would even have one more level that you're, because I would rather see wire before the first one.
Yeah, but like with these cameras, this is a POC going on with Axis, and they have cameras that do PoE, and then they have cheaper cameras that do only Wi-Fi. So that was a requirement to support both type of cameras. And
the current retail price for this is 500 euros?
I think the current retail price per unit, it's around 450 euros. And then typically we are doing projects of 100 or 1,000 units. And then it can drop till 250 euros. So that's the type of pricing you're looking at.
And get them customized. Now, you also had mentioned you did some, not just city Wi-Fi, but also transportation within a city Wi-Fi. How would a Linxs fit, say, in a train or a bus network?
Another good question. So if you look at city Wi-Fi or public transport Wi-Fi, it all started with offering an extra service to the end user, to the customer, which was guest Wi-Fi. But now, of course, everybody starts using 4G. So the companies coming back to us and to the market, and they say, okay, we need added value in order to defend the costs that we are putting in the guest Wi-Fi infrastructure. And what we see now happening with public transport companies is that they say, okay, we still need guest Wi-Fi, because for us, it's a way to promote a brand and also to capture marketing information about the users, but we need extra stuff in order to motivate to the management why we want to do that. So the next things you see happening right now is that these type of routers are also being used next to providing guest Wi-Fi on a bus, are also being used, for instance, to hook up the ticketing systems to it, the security cameras to it, and then via the sensors, for instance, to monitor where a vehicle is, what's the driving behavior of the chauffeur. Then via Bluetooth and Wi-Fi scanning to count the number of passengers. You can measure the air quality. You can look at the noise level in the vehicle, etc. So it just becomes, for almost the same price, it's a much broader offering you can offer to these customers, which makes it for them easier to defend it to the management to go for providing public Wi-Fi or guest Wi-Fi in buses. And the same is true for cities.
Well, one of the issues that I found with customers, when you have a lot of these mobile devices, you're either giving them into vehicles or in employees' hands or buy all those coffee machines, is how do you control and manage this wide set of inventory and make sure that they're all on, have the current code base, that they're not having issues, that they're all configured properly? What kind of management platform do you have over the Linxs?
Well, that's then I'm coming back to the SD-WAN functionality. So SD-WAN, like I said, it's a kind of a software stack you install on the Linxs devices itself, and then we have the same kind of stack on the cloud platform. And the first time you put the Linxs device into the power, it will connect automatically over the 4G network to the cloud, to our platform, and it will say, hi, I'm device X, give me my configuration file. And at that moment, the configuration file is being pushed to the device. And if this device then belongs to, for instance, customer A, via the central management platform, he can see his device coming live with the configuration that he decided to put onto it, and he can easily manage it. So that's part of the offering. And you can compare it a bit like what Meraki did with their cloud offering for Wi-Fi access points, with the only difference that now you can manage it, you can manage more things on it, and you can also manage it over, for instance, 4G or an open Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, you have more backhaul options.
Yeah, correct.
So say you were a retailer with 20 or 30 shops, you could just put these in, send them out, they turn them on, and you can configure them remotely without ever having to have anyone on site, and offer guest Wi-Fi on top of it.
Yeah, exactly.
So since you're into new things or new tinks, what's next?
Probably what we have seen is that based upon the architecture we have chosen, we are probably good for the next 5 years. Yeah. So maybe there is coming. Maybe we have to upgrade next year with an AX Wi-Fi chip. That's possible. That's not a big investment. But I think with the device we are going to add 2 other categories. One is a very cheap device that only does then the Wi-Fi, Ethernet, and LTE stuff for maybe half the price. That's one thing we are thinking about. And then the other question we are seeing is to have more computing power on the Linxs device itself. So there we are thinking about adding an extra GPU processor, so that, for instance, when you hook up a camera to the Linxs, that the device itself can already pre-process certain images prior to sending to the cloud. So in a nutshell, we have now a medium device. We are thinking about adding a light version and then a pro version.
Nice way to take a product and expand into different markets with it.
Yeah.
One final question about LTE. The LTE is different around the world. So you're making these in Belgium.
Yeah.
And what frequencies, what LTE carriers can it work with?
In theory, the chipset we have chosen should support all the worldwide bands. Yeah. The only thing is, once you have chosen the chipset, then you have to add the RF modules to it. Yeah. So the RF module that's now being used to support all the bands in Asia Pacific and Europe and Africa. Unfortunately, not yet the bands in North America and Canada. But it's something that we are looking at. So the moment we have the first big deals coming from the US, we are going to add also this kind of feature to the device. And of course, at the end, it's a dream to have one device that can talk with all the bands. And it's something we're looking at.
Well, fantastic. Well, Gery, thank you for your time. I appreciate your information. Where would people track down you on the internet? I'm sure you have Twitter and a web page.
Yeah, so Linxs is the website, linxs.io. And my name is Gery Pollet, and you can easily drop me a mail via LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn.
And we'll put links to your company and some of the brochures and pictures in the show notes. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Wi-Fi question of the day with Lee Badman.
Well, Lee, welcome back to the show. What's our Wi-Fi question of the day?
Hey, Matthew. So, bit of a pet peeve question today. And we've all got them, but, what bits and pieces do vendors charge too much for? What are they putting a price tag on that might seem nonsensical? And again, it's one of those things where everybody has their own version of what's okay to charge for and what's not. Some of the more obvious ones that have kind of torqued me off, power cords, rack mounts, things that are, if they're not there, you absolutely can't proceed with what you're doing. So why just, add insult to it?
Yeah.
And power or PoE injectors, GBIC, stuff like that. If things warrant a price, good, give me a price, but make it fair. We also have the effect of, you put a vendor logo on it and all of a sudden it's worth 10 times more than it was before the logo. That's kind of silly. Goofy things like specially keyed power cables. I mean, maybe there's a real rationale behind it from the vendor perspective, but to the end user or the person who's getting charged for it, it just feels like gouging. And then when you get away from hardware, get into software, licensing. You have to, pay license fees to unlock cores or, feature sets that, maybe weren't clear up front or just seem so blatantly obvious as they need to be there. But why am I being charged for it? Just for basic functionality? I'm not saying vendors don't have a right to, to make money off their products, but at the same time, there's a fine line between, okay, this is fair, and it really feels like, I'm getting gouged. And my one fear, just to give a little perspective going forward, my one fear is now that basically every network company says we're a software company and we're in this realm of, software-defined networking. My own personal fear is just people are going to go license happy, and this notion of, gouging via license is going to, just become more pervasive. I hope it's not the case. Yeah. But I do fear the effect.
Did you get any vendors responding to this question on the other side of that?
No, and a lot of times, with this framework, people can't come out directly, and vendors don't come out and directly defend themselves. So it's a little unfair at times. A lot of times it's just the wireless professional venting. Every now and then you'll get a vendor that does chime in and say, hey, we do this, check it out. But rarely do they, defend some of the mud that gets thrown at them. And maybe it would be good if they did, but I also get why they don't. It's risky business, and the arguments that can ensue and all of that can devolve into petty pretty quick.
Yeah, and this is Lee's Wi-Fi question of the day, so you get to ask whatever you want, right?
Yeah, damn right.
Awesome. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks, Matthew.
10 Talks.
All right. So I started my own wireless ISP in October, or last fall. So I'm just going to share some experiences I had with that and what I'm doing. So I'm just going to go over who I am, where I'm doing this, why I'm doing this, and what I'm doing. So my day-to-day job is I'm a network admin in a small rural K-12. I'm an independent consultant as well with the same company. You can find me on Twitter at McKim. I blog at greatwhitewifi.com/blog. I was a guest for episode 99 of the Clear Descent podcast, and I was the inaugural winner of the Next Wi-Fi Rockstar contest about 3.5 years ago, I think now, Sam. And keep your ears and eyes open for more info on that sometime. This is just a picture of my wife, who is CFO, cabler, and other duties as requested, but not assigned. Excuse me. So we're in, this is where I am up here in Rossburn, Manitoba. So we're just above North Dakota. And this is a little more zoomed in on where my network is. Farthest customer I have right now is down in the bottom there, little green pin. They're about 8 miles, 12 kilometers. My house is not on here yet because of the trees around my yard, so I can't even get on my own wireless network yet, which sucks. So this is the town of Rossburn. Some of the customers I have in town. About 600 people in Rossburn. The options we have, I'll get into our options there anyways. So why did I do this? The options we have around this area, if you live in town, you get 5 meg down, 500K up DSL. If you live out of town, there's another WISP in the area. This is who I subscribe from. And I pay, well, we don't need to talk about that, but usage limits and not enough upload speed, right? Go to upload a file to Google Drive, and everything in my house says no internet connectivity. The school division I work for is part of the Park West Fiber Optic Cooperative. So what they did is they joined forces with 3 of the municipal governments in the region. It's kind of like counties. And they buried about, I think it's about 300 kilometers of fiber. So that really opened up the market for easy entry. And like I said, I'm just a fed up WISP customer. So what have I done? Got the fiber at the local high school. From there, it's a very short point-to-point link to the local grain elevator. This is where I do my distribution from. And then I'll talk about what I do for customer installs a little bit, try to show my NMS and a few other considerations. Hopefully I'll get there. So this is a grain elevator, 120 feet tall. You can see access points up top. You're definitely not getting out on that roof. There's some access hatches that you can kind of get about half your body out. So everything that was done up there is kind of within arm's reach. There's that other antenna, there's the owner's, I think it's UHF for his two-way radio system. This is just a very high level network diagram. So the one takeaway from this is that I actually don't really do any routing of my customers' internet traffic or anything like that. That's all handled by my upstream provider. So basically, I bridge from the customer's router up to my provider. He handles the DHCP. I'm not doing that. Everybody gets public address and DNS and gateway and all that stuff. I look after all my own management and yeah, and then some of these model numbers are just some of the equipment that I have in each site, which I'll get into a little bit more. So what am I doing? Again, point-to-point link, very short, about 615 meters. If you want to convert that to yards, go ahead. Because it's so short, I can use Uni 2E and still stay under regulatory limits for EIRP. In Canada, that is 1 watt. So this unit here is the Ubiquiti light beam. It's 23 dBi. All the electronics are integrated into the feed horn. So EIRP on there is, yeah, it's about, I think we're running about 27 dBm out of that right now. And I'm using a 40 megahertz channel. This is just the dashboard of that radio. So it's half duplex. The capacity is 302.4 megabits per second. It's not 604. Just some of the information you get. Ubiquiti uses, or they have an extra chipset in their radios that is kind of a spectrum analyzer. I haven't actually tested it with just, say, any other RF energy that isn't 802.11 or coming from a Ubiquiti radio. And then you get signal strength information and what your transmit and receive data rates are. The graphing just populates as you're logged in, so it's not that helpful. And then you get your rate histories, which is kind of nice. So if you've had issues, you can go back and see like, whoa, I was only running at 4x there instead of 8, so there must have been something going on, and let's dig into that a bit. This is the distribution, some pictures of the access points. Using Ubiquiti Rocket Prism 5 AC radios. Prism is their kind of filtering technology. I don't really have time to get into that too much. The antennas are in RF elements, 17 dBi, 90-degree sector, 20 megahertz channels, using Uni 3 for increased EIRP, better range, and I'm using GPS sync, which I'll get into a little bit as well. This is just a dashboard from the access point, so you can see same kind of information. You'll notice the capacities are different here, and this has to do with the GPS sync and excuse me, and the fixed frame technology. And so what that does, there's a ratio involved for download to upload, and you can actually add the capacity numbers together to get the aggregate for the access point. Excuse me, in this case. So same signal strength information, some client information. You get signal strengths, distances, uptimes. You can kick them off if you think there's a problem and you just need to reset the connection. What is GPS sync? So all the access points come with GPS antennas. They get timing from GPS, and that allows you to use an AB channel plan, or if you're using 6 sectors, ABC. So access points on channel A are going to transmit it at exactly the same time, and their clients are all going to come back at the same time. So you're not getting any interference because you have one AP transmitting when the other one's receiving. That's kind of the easiest way to explain it. And then if you're going with multi-tower designs, you just have to alternate, like you can see in the second image there. With the FRIX, so that gives you frequency reuse. With 4 APs, I'm only using 2 20 megahertz channels. The fixed frame timing you get with Ubiquiti, you get 8 milliseconds or 5 milliseconds. Obviously, the longer frame size is increasing your latency, but it's increasing your throughput. So it's kind of what do you want to do? How do you need your network to work? And then the download-upload ratio, Ubiquiti gives you options of 50-50, 66-33, or 75-25, and I'm currently, excuse me, I'm currently running 75-25. This is just a spec sheet from the sectors I'm using. So the only thing I really wanted to point out here is the beam widths. They always list, this is kind of typical with WISP stuff, they list a 3 dB and a 6 dB beam width. So you really need to consider that when you're doing your planning. So you can see they call it a 90-degree sector, but the 3 dB beam width is only 75 degrees. This is a tool I use for coverage studies and initial site surveys. It's called Linxs from Ubiquiti. Basically, you put in transmit power or EIRP, your frequency, you can pick what type of antenna or what type of device you're using from them, and locate your station, and it's going to give you some pretty good information and expected signal strength, which you should always know if you're going to do an install like this. What I really like about it is this section. So when you get a link in there, it gives you these clearances. Because there's no vegetation or ground cover data in it, excuse me, you can pick a high spot, see what your clearance for your Fresnel zone is, pardon me, and then you can go either into Google Earth, see if there's some trees there, or just take a drive if you know where it is. Because you can pinpoint, and if you can see under the blue dot, there's a little white dot, which is where this line matches up to, so you can get the overhead view of it too. So what am I doing for customers? Various types of installs, rooftops. The middle one there is just somebody who's like 100 yards from the elevator, so it's just on a post of their deck. The farthest one on the right is someone who has a really big shelter belt, so we have to obviously get outside that to get line of sight. So that's just a tripod anchored to a pallet. The pallet will have some bricks on it at some point just to keep it down. It's cabled back to an outbuilding on their property, and then from that outbuilding, there's another very short point-to-point link to their house. First picture on the left here is just a rip and replace from the other provider. Second one is same kind of thing, line of sight from the customer's grain bin, but not to their house. So we connect at the grain bin, and then short point-to-point back to the house. And then the third picture there is on their house. This is my NMS. It's called UNMS, again, from Ubiquiti. Pretty handy. You can get customer signal strengths. You can schedule firmware upgrades from this. It's easy, like 5 minutes, check the basic network health. It'll do backups automatically for you and show you what's going on. And then quick other stuff. I see I'm out of time. Are you afraid of heights? If you are, probably not the business for you. You should have basic understanding of building construction and know how to use hand tools, because you are attaching things to structures. Liability insurance, not only to cover anything that happens to your installs on your customer's premises, but also for your site. I had to name the elevator owner as kind of an additional insured to my business insurance. What kind of packages are you going to offer? I just said no packages. Everything's unmetered. I don't want to deal with that, and I'm small, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. How are you going to bill your customers and receive payments? There's a couple different platforms out there. I'm too small to really make it economical for me, so I'm just using QuickBooks Online. Still does automatic recurring credit cards. And then any terms of service, SLAs, service agreements, anything that anybody's signing, make sure you have a lawyer to look at it. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.